welcome to Celluloid Chronicles,
a historical movie podcast.
I'm Brick.
I'm Birdy.
Yay!
And we are here again for part 2 of
Harriet.
Yep. And just as a reminder, we got some trigger warnings. There will be depictions of slavery, abuse, murder, and violence against minorities. So just as a reminder before we dive right in, I wanted to bring that up. So we are here for part 2. As you may remember, when we left off, we had just talked about Frederick Douglass and a few other things. William Still. We're back. We don't got much foreplay today. Unless you have anything, Brick. I don't know.
Not that I can think of.
We're here to get it done. So where we left off, we talked about Harriet saving some more of her family, according to the movie. So do you want to continue us in where we left off?
Sure. So Harriet has gotten her brothers and the others who have joined them. She's gotten them, and she has officially been inducted into the Underground Railroad as a conductor. And she ends up joining the Blackjacks as a crew member as a way to be able to go back and forth between this north and south. We see one of her stints getting people. We see she has like roughly a group of like a dozen people in a field, and they hear Harriet singing Go Down Moses.
Yeah.
I loved this scene. They hear her singing Go Down Moses, and they just drop their tools and run to meet her. And this is when, I know you had mentioned the shoes. This is when she gives them the shoes, and they're all able to escape. And this is probably one of my favorite montages ever. I love this montage. It's set to the song Sinner Man.
Oh yeah, that which is also a great song. Even I know that song.
And we see that notices are being hung up for a reward for Moses. And it starts off as $125 and it eventually goes up to $300. But the notices are all being torn down.
I have no evidence that that's actually what was happening, but I do like it.
We end up seeing a scene from one of her visions of Harriet leading a group across the field while the slave catchers are chasing them. So this was actually from one of her visions. They all climb into a wagon, and this is the same wagon that she rode in when she ran, when she escaped. And we see that the man who had stopped and told her it was time to get out, he knows she's there. He knows everybody's there. He waits for all of them to hop in. He closes it up. He and his wife give each other a little... So yeah, she has brought in this gentleman as an assistant.
You know what? I didn't even clock that. Good job. I did not clock that was the same guy.
I loved how smooth it was that she got everybody up there and they like damn near dove in. Mm-hmm. And she gets up and he just, as if he didn't even see anything, and he just closes the flaps. I loved it.
Wow, I didn't even clock that was the same guy. Again, this guy is on... labeled, basically. Yeah. I don't know if this is a real person. I don't know if this was anybody. There's no name. At least, I don't know if you checked the credits, if this was a guy. Yeah, so I think this is a stand-in for random people that did help on the Underground Railroad. I'm sure this may have happened. It is a really cool scene.
And when she gets back to Philadelphia and she brings them into the Anti-Slavery Society, Still falls out of his chair.
He does, yeah. I do like that.
And then just grabs her up in this great big bear hug. I love that scene. And then like when they all walk away like into the office, and he's just kind of like, whew, like put myself together.
Yeah, I did love that because I'm sure there had to be that level of emotion.
Oh, I can't even imagine.
In William Still as a real individual, even if it didn't happen exactly this way, getting emotional about it like, oh my God, Harriet Tubman is doing these things.
Yes, like first of all, she is safe. She made it back, and she brought this many people. She's brought them to safety,
and she's doing it over and over and over again, which is phenomenal. Mm-hmm. And the statistics are low for that. I mean, it's hard to even put in perspective what she is doing. She is going through fields and rivers and enemy territory.
Literally. Enemy territory.
Again and again and again, and bringing people back with no harm done. I don't know how to emphasize that anymore. Like,
I do love we get to see her posing for Harriet's most recognized photo, and I love that William is trying to like help pose her, and she just kind of like slaps.
Get off. I will do this my way.
I love the way that she plays the character. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
You know, Harriet, of course, she still wants to get her sister and her niece and nephew. She wants to get them to freedom, but no one has been able to get any word to Rachel because she is inside the house. Harriet decides she's going to go herself because everyone is looking for Moses, not knowing that it's a woman. And when she gets there, she is able to get Rachel outside, but she refuses to leave because Gideon has followed through with taking her children. He has not sold them, or at least not the eldest, but she doesn't know where they are, and she refuses to leave without them. And she also tells Harriet that Robert's wife has remarried and tells her, do not judge those who are not able to run.
Yeah.
And they do what they need to stay sane.
It's true. It's sad. Yeah. It's true. It harkens back to Harriet's former husband. I mean, I get it. Yeah. Although I still don't quite forgive Harriet's husband, John, just because, like, dude, you did that real quick.
And and in this instance, we're talking about a woman alone with a child enslaved.
I will add some history stuff at this point. So, as mentioned before, Harriet was saving money while she worked in Philadelphia and Cape May in New Jersey, and she was there while the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850 was passed. There's been some mention of this. Again, the timeline is wibbly wobbly. This law mandated the law enforcement cooperation in capturing escaped slaves, even in free states, so the North, and heavily punished those who aided the escapees. The heightened danger did lead to more escaped slaves escape refuge in southern Ontario, Canada, where slavery was abolished. Additionally, racial tensions did start growing in Philadelphia as poor Irish immigrants competed with free blacks for jobs. That's a whole other conversation. But yeah, that's a whole thing, which did lead to tensions where even if you were free, but if you were poor and you're struggling and you see a free or formerly enslaved individual taking a job that you wanted, could lead to temptation to call in the Fugitive Slave Act. Not saying it's right, but it was a thing that happened. Just a couple notes here, especially on the black slave catchers that they decided to add into the movie, which, boy, you picked the rarest form of slave catcher you could.
There were some.
There was some.
Not many.
And we have no evidence that Harriet ever encountered any. So I will, of course, prelude that and say that Walter and Bigger Long did not exist. So Walter, in the movie, and I quote, he acts as a black slave tracker that eventually switches sides to assist Harriet Tubman. Based on historical figures, the character represents the real-life spies and allies who worked with Tubman during the abolitionist movement and during the Civil War. Fair enough. Did he need to be a former slave catcher? I don't know, but that he did not actually exist, which was actually sad because I was like, ooh, are you someone really cool. Interesting? And again, Bigger Long, the sadistic black slave catcher that they created. It was, again, extremely rare, and I'm not sure entirely necessary for this movie. They could have had a white slave catcher, even if they kept Walter as like a shifting side character that transitioned over. Yeah, I just wanted to leave those couple notes, and back to Brick.
So after Rachel has refused to leave, I like this scene. This is where Harriet is praying to God to protect them, and she senses Walter watching her. And he offers to help her, saying that he knows the woods, the rivers, and most of the people in the area. And when she asks why she should trust him, he says most people should not. But he hopes that she'll introduce him to God because he has some explaining to do. I understand, yes, it is created for the movie, but I like the idea of somebody witnessing her heroism inspired him
Yeah, I did like that, and I think that is a thing that did happen. And I do like the idea that someone directly witnessed her connection to the spirit.
Yes.
Right?
Next, we're at a meeting of a bunch of honkies in town. And they are discussing the problem of Moses, who they believe must be a white man in blackface because, I mean, this person is intelligent and they're getting one over on us. It cannot possibly be a black person.
Can't actually be a black person.
It's gotta be a white guy in blackface.
Absolutely.
That's the only,
that's the only way this could happen.
Yep. Long is talking to Gideon. And he tells him that he believes Moses is the person who led the people from the Broadus farm.
Yeah.
And Gideon, he dismisses this, no. But Long asks if he knows the name Minty. So now he knows that it's Harriet leading the escaped people. And Long knows that she lives in Philly. I mean, it's okay. I don't know why I said it that way. But anyway,
I mean, a lot of people call it Philly.
So arriving in Philadelphia is when Harriet learns in the movie that Congress has passed the Fugitive Slave Act. As Birdy has mentioned, this is requiring local law enforcement in any state to assist in the recapture. This means they need to leave. They need to get out of here. They need to go to Canada. Harriet, she wants to find her brothers, but still finds her and tells her he's already sent them on. She needs to get on a train. She needs to go, but she wants to tell Marie goodbye first. But when she gets inside, she finds that Gideon and Long are beating Marie, trying to get information about Harriet, but Marie refuses to tell them anything. Marie, she sees Harriet. She's loading her gun. She's about to intervene, but Marie stops her by telling the men, but actually talking to her, quote, she's got to live long enough to do God's will. She knows that. And that does make her stop. But as they leave, Marie, she calls Long a traitor and he kicks her in the head. And Harriet is able to get to her in time to at least be with her as she dies. I was very relieved when I learned from Birdy that Marie did not exist.
No, that was seriously, I think that was the most, I guess, heart-wrenching part of the movie, honestly. The most horrifying that they did. It was a bit, well, it wasn't graphic, but it was, for the movie, it was the most graphic part, right? So, yeah, things like that did.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, unfortunately. And she makes it back to the boat, but Gideon is at the dock, and he sees her, and he pulls a gun, but a group of abolitionists waiting at the dock to protect people getting on boats, they pull their guns. And
I did like that.
Yes, a group of them pointing their guns at Gideon, and this is including John Brown, who he had been the gentleman reading from the Bible.
I didn't even clock that.
I didn't either until I can't remember what I was reading. I was like, John Brown, wait, they did have him in here? But yeah, he was the guy that was reading from the Bible, and I fucking love that he stops reading to pull out a gun and point at.
Okay, see, they didn't...
Well, they didn't actually name Douglas either, so... She and her family, they do make it to Canada. And Harriet, she has a vision of her sister Rachel, and shortly after which, Reverend Green sends a letter to tell them that she has passed away.
Yeah.
And then later in New York is when she meets Senator Seward, who will later sell her some land and a house. But right now they are there for a meeting of the Underground Railroad Committee to plan what to do next. And before we get into their next moves, I know Birdy has information about Senator Seward.
Yes, he was real. When they met them in the movie, see, I do know that part because they did name him. Thank you. I was like, is this a real guy? Yeah, so William Henry Seward lived from 1801 to 1872, and he was an American politician, a New York governor, and U.S. Senator who served as Secretary of State from 1861 to 1869, so right through the Civil War. He was a vocal opponent of slavery's expansion and a key early Republican. Don't forget, Republicans at this time were basically Democrats, and Democrats were Republicans at this time. It didn't flip till World War II. He was lauded for his Union support during the Civil War, and he also negotiated the Alaska Purchase. So we can thank him for Alaska. William Seward was born in Florida, New York. It took me a minute too. In 1801, and he was a lawyer who moved to Auburn, New York later on. Initially, he was anti-Mason, so I assume Masonic Temple, and he entered the New York State Senate in 1830. After an unsuccessful Whig gubernatorial run in 1834. So that's a governorship. I do know that. But again, Whig, I thought that was an English thing.
Yeah.
Or British thing. Apparently we had Whigs too. Anyway.
I mean, I know we based it off of that because I remember that from The Favorite.
Seward was elected governor for two-year terms between 1838 and 1842. As governor, he advanced the rights and opportunities for Black residents, guaranteed jury trials for fugitive slaves, protected abolitionists, and intervened in the cases of free Black individuals illegally enslaved in the South. This guy was cool. Yeah.
You mean that people who were free and had the documentation to prove it were snatched up and deported?
I know, it's unbelievable. How could that even happen? Definitely.
That would never happen.
Never happen today. People with proper paperwork that are U.S. citizens being detained and imprisoned.
Well, and I'm sure that even the ones that were escaped slaves, they must have gotten a fair trial.
Oh yeah, of course.
Because it's America. That's what
it's America. Do. Everyone's welcome and everyone's free.
Everybody qualifies for all the same laws and rights.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah.
Huh.
Anyway.
So
he did all that, and then after years of practicing law in Auburn, which part of my family's from, Auburn, New York, he was elected to the U.S. Senate in 1849. His strong anti-slavery stances earned him hatred in the South. But he was reelected in 1855, and he joined the nascent Republican Party and became a leading figure. Again, different Republican Party than from today. He was the front runner for the 1860 presidential nomination. But his anti-slavery views, support for immigrants and Catholics, and association with political boss Thurlow Weed, I have heard of him, cost him the nomination to Abraham Lincoln. So can you imagine if we had him and even instead of Abraham Lincoln? Yeah. I mean, as much as Abraham Lincoln did.
Yeah.
Having William Seward. Oh my goodness. But despite his disappointment, I am disappointed as well. Seward campaigned for Lincoln, who then appointed him Secretary of State. So, Fair enough. So even though he failed to prevent secession of the South, he staunchly supported the Union and deterred foreign intervention from the United Kingdom and France in the Civil War. He's like, guys, don't, no, thank you, but no.
It's not.
He was seriously wounded in the 1865 assassination plot that killed Lincoln. Oh. Wait, hold on. Hold for reference chat. Oh,
they wanted to assassinate him.
This is the preparations.
I had patients today that were telling me that they were descended from John Wilkes Booth.
Really?
They were odd.
They were
telling me that they were descended from John Wilkes Booth and a king, but they couldn't tell me what king.
It's kind of important. There's a lot of kings, right?
Oh, I forget his name.
Oh, some English king. Edward the First. Everyone's fucking related to Edward the First. I'm just gonna put that out there. Booth had several drinks while waiting for his planned time. No shit. All right, I think it's coming down to that he was planned to be shot, but he shot Lincoln first, and he was injured. Okay, so double checking our information. On the night that Abraham Lincoln was assassinated, Lewis Powell, who was a co-conspirator of Wilkes Booth, did attempt to kill William Seward at his own home. Powell was guided to Secretary of State Seward's house, but he failed to kill Seward. because Powell was unfamiliar with Washington, D.C. Yeah, there was a deception to try to say that someone was delivering medication to William Seward, but it became suspicious, and his son actually said that his father was asleep and didn't need it right now. But his daughter came out and said he was awake, and I quote, Powell turned as if to start downstairs, but suddenly turned again and drew his revolver. He aimed at Frederick's forehead and pulled the trigger, but the gun misfired. The amount of stories that exist for misfiring guns. He bludgeoned Frederick unconscious with it.
Yes.
Then Belle yelled, "Murder, murder," and ran outside for help. Fanny opened the door again, and Powell shoved past her to Seward's bed. He stabbed at Seward's face and neck, slicing open his cheek. However, the splint, often mistakenly described as a neck brace that doctors had fitted to Seward's broken jaw, prevented the blade from penetrating his jugular vein. This guy almost died.
That's cool. I mean, no.
Seward eventually recovered, though with serious scars to his face. Seward's son, Augustus, and Sergeant George F. Robinson, a soldier assigned to Seward, were alerted by Fanny's screams and received stab wounds in struggling with Powell. As Augustus went for a pistol, Powell ran downstairs toward the door, where he encountered Emmerich Hansel, a State Department messenger. Powell stabbed Hansel in the back, then ran outside exclaiming, "I'm mad, I'm mad." Screams from the house had frightened Harold, who ran off, leaving Powell to find his own way in an unfamiliar city. Holy shit. I never heard of this. Obviously, it's overshadowed by Abraham Lincoln's actual assassination, but this was pretty damn close. So that is the attempted assassination of William Seward on the same night as the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. Where are we?
Crazy. So they are at Seward's house, and they're discussing the fact that at this point you can no longer just bring people to the northern states. You need to bring them to Canada.
Yeah.
And what should they do? And I love Frederick Douglass says that they should just kill the slave catchers to send a message.
I mean, it's fair.
I mean, I'm not going to say I would disagree.
Yeah.
But still, he says that civil war may be the only option, but Harriet, she does not want to wait for war to continue freeing people. Harriet tells them that most of them have always been free and can't understand, while others, maybe you've been free so long you're starting to forget. And she tells them, paraphrased, children are forced to work, girls are assaulted, men whipped, and children are sold and separated from family, and she will give all her blood to help them to freedom until slavery is over. She says that she's not going to stop just because it's far. And we see next she has a vision of her father, so now she knows she needs to bring him. In the congregation at Reverend Green's church, she's leading a sermon, and Walter walks in and sits next to this lovely lady. Turns out that is Harriet. She is blending into the congregation. Walter has built a cart, and this is to help transport Rit. And when Harriet finds her mother, this poor woman, she at first thinks that she's the angel of death. And she's ready to go. She wants to join her daughters.
Aww.
Which, yeah, that's a little heartbreaking. But Harriet explains to her, I'm not the angel of death. And when she tells her, I'm Moses, and she gets so proud.
Yeah.
And then later, when Ben is there and she goes, honey, did you know our daughter, our Harriet, our Minty is Moses?
I did kind of love that.
That was really cool. When she finds her father, and I love it, he says, I can't pull my eyes from you. I need to look at you.
Yeah. Oh.
Walter, he takes her parents and he's going to hide them at the church. At the house, we see Rachel's daughter. I don't know entirely if I'm pronouncing her name correctly, Angerine, but they call her Anger.
I think it's Angerine and they call her Anger.
And she is now serving Eliza in place of her mother. There's a group of local slave owners and they arrive at the farm. They now know Moses used to live on the Brodus farm. And they believe since Moses escaped from the Brodus family, the Brodus family should compensate them for all the slaves she's been able to get away.
Also, like, come on.
Inside, Anger is with the daughter when the other sons come in, and Harriet walks in with her gun drawn and tells Anger that she is her mother's sister, and we learn that the youngest, Rachel's son, they don't know where Gideon has sent him. Walter, meanwhile, catches an overseer in the outhouse, and he ends up tying him up and leaving him in the outhouse, which I love. Eliza, she's, I don't know, revving everybody up, and now she's getting everybody to focus on Harriet, and she's able to pull everybody to their side by, we need to take care of her. This is our enemy. This is what we should be fighting against. She declares that, they're going to make her come out of hiding by placing Anger up for auction, and then she'll have to come and save her, which probably was true. Not realizing that she's already getting Anger out of the goddamn house. Too late. And when we cut back, Anger is pointing a gun at the family members.
I did like that.
As Harriet ties them all up, and when she shoots at one of the guy's feet, does not shoot him into the floor, she says it's for Rachel, and he pees himself.
So this whole scene, unfortunately, is a little bit of fantasy. I really like this, but to kind of catch us up, between 1851, which definitely was last episode, and 1862, which is right at the first year of the Civil War, Tubman had definitely taken on the nickname of Moses and had at that point conducted about 13 expeditions to Maryland's eastern shore, which was her previous enslavement area, and she personally freed around 70 enslaved people, including her brothers Henry, Ben, Robert, and their wives, and some children. She also guided about 50 to 60 others to escape. So she didn't actually take them personally, freeing them, but she told them how to escape. And yes, fearing for her parents' safety, especially after her father's potential arrest for aiding runaways, she led her aging parents north to St. Catharines, Canada, a community of formerly enslaved people, in 1857. Her father had purchased her mother's freedom in 1855, but at that point, the area was still remaining hostile, which is why she led them out of there. Because, they were free, but they were helping people. It's good to note that Tubman's final rescue mission was in November 1860, which failed to free her sister Rachel. And subsequently, Rachel did pass on, and Rachel had 2 children, Ben and Angerine, or Anger. There was a $30 bribe, which equals about $1,070 in 2025. That was needed for the children, but Tubman, lacking the money, had to leave them enslaved, and their fates are actually unknown. So just to clarify, this whole scene where she's freeing Rachel's children did not happen. Unfortunately, it is fantasy. I like that they kind of gave that extra hope, saving her sister's children. That didn't happen, and I'm not sure how I feel about them saying she did when she didn't, because that's some misinformation out there. Oh yeah, and Harriet Tubman managed to save all her family. Unfortunately not. So their fates are still unknown 200 years later, but at that point, she was undeterred, and she gathered another family called the Inalls and others from Dorchester County. And despite several delays and slave catchers and severe cold and hunger and an infant that needed to be quieted by paregoric, we talked about this last episode, so we got another baby, or maybe it's the same baby they based it on, I'm not sure. They quieted that baby with some medication. Yup. The group finally reached David and Martha Wright's home in Auburn, New York on December 28th, 1860. So, and then from there, they went on to Canada. It's just really sad because, again, this movie's really nice and it's really on point with a lot of things, but I'm not sure how I feel about that. So from Harriet herself, she's quoted as saying, "I was the conductor of the Underground Railroad for 8 years, and I can say what most conductors can't say. I never ran my train off the track, and I never lost a passenger." And this was at a suffragette convention in New York in 1896. All right, Brick.
So she and Anger, they meet up with Walter, and she begins singing Go Down Moses, which brings the other slaves out to join them. And I love Walter. We're going to need a bigger cart.
Yeah, I did. I'm like, wow, of all the
references. Yeah.
The Jaws reference. If anybody needs to know, we need a bigger boat.
Yep.
It's a Jaws reference.
And as they're passing through the woods, a woman, Tilly, she runs up and she asks them to take her because her master is planning to kill her. And since they need a bigger cart, they hold a guy up and they take his cart.
They do.
Yep. Mm-hmm. And now all of these local slave owners, slave catchers, overseers, all these people that Eliza has riled up, they are waiting at the bridge where they expect them to pass. And Tilly, who is very light-skinned, she is posing as a young white man driving the cart so that everybody else can hide underneath. It looks like corn or something, so that they can hide in the cart and she can pass. And when she gets to the bridge, they say they need to check the wagon. But before they can start, one of the men notices, "Oh, young man, you look just like Grant."
Slave owner.
Yeah, whoever this dude is, Grant. And Tilly, posing as a young man, says, "Oh, that's my father." And the guy's, "Ah, shucks. Well, you go right on ahead then. Don't you worry. Just tell your dad he owes me some whiskey." Okay, cool. They make it through without looking in the wagon. And when Gideon and Long arrive, this guy mentions, "Oh yeah, Grant's son passed through. He was riding the wagon." But Gideon tells Long that Grant only has 5 white daughters and a slave who looks like him. So you know what that means.
Yep.
And they go off on their own to catch the group. And this is where we see this very sweet moment. Harriet, she's comforting her mother and she's telling them about the house that she's bought and that they're going to have everybody together. And while they're getting them into the boat, Harriet has a vision and she knows that Gideon is nearby, and she tells Walter to get her family to safety, and she goes to lure Gideon in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
While he and Long are chasing her, Long tries to shoot her, and I do love she shoots the hat off his head, but Gideon kills him, but this is only because he wants to be the one to kill her himself.
Yeah, or possess her. Whatever he has in mind. She's hiding behind a tree just long enough to reload her gun and hold Gideon up as he rides up. And she makes him drop his gun. He tries to pull another one. She shoots him in the hand. She makes him get down and kneel. And this is another moment where he tries to manipulate her. And he's claiming, "I know that you care about me because you prayed for me that one time, remember?" That one time, 20 years ago.
Yeah, but she tells him she was asking God, quote, "how a sickly little boy could believe he owned me," and asking God to give me strength to fight. She's got him kneeling there, and she points the gun at him, and she tells him that he's going to die here, that you're going to die here, and quote, "on a freezing, blood-soaked battlefield, the moans of a generation of young men dying around you in agony for a lost cause, for a vile and wicked idea, for the sin of slavery. Can you hear them?" And then she fires the gun in the air and screams at him. And I love, "God don't mean people to own people, Gideon. Our time is near."
Yeah.
And she takes his horse and she just rides off.
Yep.
Leaves his ass there. We jump ahead. It's 2 years into the Civil War at the Combahee River, and Harriet is leading a troop of black soldiers. You can see a ship in the back or a larger boat, and all of the soldiers are in rowboats in the river. Harriet begins singing "Wade in the Water," And after a moment, a large group of escaped slaves run from the woods across the field into the water to the boats. Slave owners or catchers, they run to the edge of the water to pull their guns, but the soldiers aim their guns also. Harriet is ready. And the next set we see is Harriet returning home to her family, as the on-screen text tells us the details of her heroism and her accomplishments, her life after the war, and the details of which Birdy has covered and will cover. Suffice to say, she was and is a fucking badass.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Stay tuned. I'm going to spend the next however many minutes covering the aftermath of Harriet Tubman. We've covered the last confrontation, in which absolute fantasy, great sentiment, great what they were trying to say. By that point, Edward Brodus, who Gideon Brodus is most directly based on, was long dead by that point. I hope it was the tuberculosis mum, as a reference to the others, for those who know. By the late 1850s, the eastern shore of Maryland had a lot of slaveholders who were publicly worried about escapees, and they suspected all the free blacks and white abolitionists. And they did not know that the petite, disabled Minty, who had run away years before, was responsible for freeing so many. Did love that. And I love the fact that they talk about the fact that she was disabled, because she was, as we talked about before, with seizures and headaches and everything else. And though there are a lot of claims that there was a $40,000 reward at the time for her capture, which would equal about 1.5 million, just under 1.5 million in today's money. Again, manufactured legend. And abolitionist in 1867 said was not too great a reward, and the high figure at that time that garnered national attention was about $12,000. So not $1 million. I don't even have the figure for today's money, but obviously not $1 million. But neither figure actually has any documentation or what they might have said the reward was at the time. In April 1858, Tubman met the abolitionist John Brown, who I will discuss, and we've mentioned before, an insurgent who favored violence to end slavery, which...
Hey...
God, I used to not be a person that favored violence, but as time goes on, you know, I'm starting to understand his point of view. Though she was not previously involved in any armed revolt, she did support his goals and the direct action he wanted to take. Both Tubman and Brown believed they were divinely called and protected by God. And Tubman also claimed the prophetic vision of meeting John Brown, actually.
Oh, okay.
And John Brown recruited several supporters and actually called Harriet Tubman General Tubman.
Oh, that's great.
Which I kind of love. And her knowledge of the border state abolitionist networks was invaluable to John Brown. And despite disapproval from some, like Frederick Douglass, John Brown did plan the military action to free the enslaved, and hoping that the enslaved people would rise up in rebellion. He did ask Harriet Tubman to gather former slaves in southern Ontario to join his fighting force, which she did. So she was definitely involved with John Brown, which, thinking back about anything I ever learned about Harriet Tubman, was not something I ever learned.
Yeah.
That she actually supported rebellion and everything else, which I wish I'd known.
Well, thinking about it, they wouldn't have told us that in school. They wouldn't have wanted us to know.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So on May 8th, 1858, John Brown held a meeting in Chatham, Canada, where he unveiled his plan for the raid on Harper's Ferry, Virginia. And when word of the plan was leaked to the government, Brown put the scheme on hold and began raising funds for its eventual resumption once things died down. And Harriet Tubman aided him in this effort with more detailed plans for the assault. And during this time, she also spent this period, giving abolitionist talks and caring for her relatives. So in early October 1859, John Brown prepared that attack on Harper's Ferry, but unfortunately, Harriet Tubman became ill and took to rest in New Bedford, Massachusetts. It's unknown if she still planned to join the raid or had grown doubtful, but by the time of the Harper's Ferry raid on October 16th, she had recovered and was in New York City, but she was still giving those talks and moving around. So a lot of speculation is she could have joined, but maybe she was busy and John Brown just moved forward. Obviously, the raid failed, and John Brown was convicted of treason, murder, and inciting a rebellion, and was hanged on December 2nd, 1859. His actions were seen by many abolitionists as a symbol of proud resistance and was carried out by a noble martyr, which they believed John Brown to be. And Harriet Tubman was very effusive with the praise that he was that, and she later told a friend, "He done more in dying than 100 men would in living." She very much thought highly of him, which is really interesting because, you know, when I learned about John Brown, and this includes both in elementary school and then when I learned more about America in my college courses and the history of America, you know, he was just this crazy guy that led a revolt. Yeah, he didn't like slavery. He didn't need to do all that. And he was still this crazy guy that caused all this violence, blah, blah, blah. But, you know, again, the more I learn about certain people and how we look at them in the history of America, it's not all that clear cut. And the more I learn about them, I'm like, actually, I think you were really cool.
I don't know for certain. This could be just the way that my mind has reframed it. But from what I remember learning was he was just crazy, and he just kind of took this idea into his head, and it had really nothing to do with abolition. He just went crazy.
He was all on his own.
Yep.
I did not hear anything.
He did not do this for a cause. He did not do this for a reason.
He was not part of a network.
No, I don't remember learning any of that.
He did this rebellion thing. Yeah. Oh, God. Learning more about it, it's like, now I need to look up books about him because it sounds like he was right on the money. Yeah, that was very interesting. And to know that Harriet Tubman, Frederick Douglass, William Still, all these people were like, yeah, he was right. He just maybe, he went further than, honestly, the most they seem to be saying is that he just went further than we did. Yeah. And unfortunately, it ended in his death. And the fact that they think of him as a martyr for the abolition of slavery, fully. And that's how I will think of him as well now. Getting back to Harriet Tubman, in early 1859, Harriet Tubman bought a 7-acre farm in Fleming, New York for about $1,200, which is about $46,400 in today's money, so a decent deal, from Frances Adeline Seward, so the wife of William Seward. She moved her parents from Canada to the U.S., or I should say, moved her parents back from Canada to the U.S. and established the farm. And it was actually near the anti-slavery center of Auburn, New York, and quickly became a sanctuary for her family, friends, and other Black Americans seeking refuge in the North. And shortly after buying her farm, she brought back an 8-year-old light-skinned Black girl named Margaret from Maryland, claiming she was her niece from free Black parents. Margaret's daughter, Alice, later said that Margaret described she had an actual prosperous childhood home and a twin brother that she left behind. So this contradicts with the known details about Harriet Tubman's family, leading historians to question the relationship of Tubman with Margaret. Alice, the daughter, said that it was even called kidnapping, saying Harriet Tubman took her from a sheltered good home to an uncared-for place. A biographer initially speculated that Margaret might have been Tubman's secret daughter, but later found evidence that Margaret was the daughter of Isaac and Mary Wolford, who were free black neighbors of Harriet Tubman's parents, who had twins named James and Margaret.
I can't imagine that she's just like oh, you're cute. I'm going to take you.
Something happened.
Yeah, maybe the parents are like, she's not safe. Somebody's going to hurt her.
This is just like a really weird mystery on top of a mystery. Like, this is why I was kind of saving it for a fun fact. Harriet Tubman accidentally kidnapped somebody. Like, did she accidentally kidnap this girl? Like,
I mean, maybe something happened. She kind of got swept up in bringing others.
A rescue,
and it's like, I can't let you go back because But even that I find hard to...
I am real curious about this.
Yeah. My jumped to conclusion is that she was in danger from somebody outside the family.
Yeah, I mean, maybe somebody was targeting her and she had to take her with her.
Maybe somebody in the area, like a white family or something, was like, oh, we want her.
I want that girl, yeah.
And again, I know I'm making this up as like,
we're speculating.
That's where my brain immediately leaps to.
It's hard to, mostly because I don't see a motive.
Right.
For her randomly kidnapping a young black girl.
And for her to have come from slavery, for her to just abduct somebody and be like, well, you live with me now, I don't see that as something she would do.
So there is something in this story that we're missing. This is a legend I never heard of.
Yeah.
And this is a legend that will go unsolved. This is more mysterious than her goddamn visions from God, right? When I read this part, I'm like, what? I wish I knew more. And if I take any mystery out of this entire story, this is going to be it. Anyway, so she may have accidentally kidnapped a young black girl. We don't know why. But oh my goodness.
That's crazy.
It's still not solved today, even though this girl had descendants. So there we go. Moving on, I'm going to move right on to the Civil War. And like I was telling Brick, this is where we're going to spend some time because of all the things that Harriet Tubman did and as exemplary, as fantastical, and as legendary as her escape and then rescuing other enslaved people are, honestly, the work she did during and after the Civil War almost is its own movie worthy.
I had no idea she was a suffragette.
Right, she was a suffragette. She basically fought in the Civil War, which no one ever talks about. The fact that they just kind of ran over this with a small scene at the end of the movie kind of upset me once I learned everything she did do after saving all those people. Honestly, if ever there was a cause to have a part 1, part 2 of someone's story with a movie, if they're going to do a movie, this movie that we are covering, Harriet, and then they need another movie, Harriet Goes to War.
And it says in the after, to this day, so 2000, when this was made, 2019, she was still one of only a few women to lead and command an armed expedition.
Yes. That's what I'm going to start talking about here, and I'm going to start talking about everything she did after her, because Brick already covered the end of the movie, so stick with me as I talk about everything she did after that was not included in the movie about this woman. They covered a very short time frame of her life, which I get, but also like, holy shit, you're cutting all these people short. Anyway, I'm going to take it from here. Through her friendship with Frederick Douglass and other abolitionists, Harriet Tubman did establish her own Underground Railroad network. And when the Civil War began in 1861, she served as a nurse, treating Union soldiers and other fugitive African Americans. And she used native plants for medicine and other things she learned and skills she acquired while she was enslaved to take care of people.
I don't think I ever knew that.
Yep, with few resources, yeah. Tubman did speak about foreseeing the Civil War as it would abolish slavery. I'm sure so many people hoped for that. And as enslaved people escaped to Union lines, the swelling numbers at places like Fort Monroe and everything else started basically swelling the Union ranks, but thankfully there was several generals and officers, such as General Benjamin Butler, who Harriet worked for. He started labeling these escapees as quote unquote contraband and seized property. No, this is good. This is good. Seized property and put them to work without pay, unfortunately. But that's how he was able to keep them.
Oh!
Instead of letting them be taken again by Confederate soldiers.
Oh, so like a necessary evil.
Yes.
Oh God, I was about ready to be like, really?
No. I mean, I'm not saying it's great. But he was able to be like, no, we're taking this because this is contraband from the enemy forces, basically.
Gotcha.
Now, again, putting them to work without pay.
Not great.
Not great, but he was able to save a lot of escaped slaves was by like, oh, no, you have to stick with us because you can't go back. You're contraband. After the first couple years of the Civil War, Harriet then became a spy and a scout.
Oh,
because she wasn't doing enough already to move behind enemy lines. Yep, she needed a hobby, so she started moving behind enemy lines for the Secretary of War, Edwin Stanton, and her group, because of course she made this group of women and escaped slaves that could go behind enemy lines because nobody was paying attention. And her group started gathering intelligence from all those informants, mapped terrain, and reconnoitered inhabitants. So by that time, she had already been a nurse, a laundress, and a cook, and provided Colonel James Montgomery with intelligence crucial to the temporary capture of Jacksonville, Florida in March of 1863. She was integral to the Civil War. Never heard about this shit. It makes me mad. But then she made more history in 1863 as the first woman to lead a U.S. military expedition, as Brick mentioned. So she was commanding Black troops in South Carolina's Combahee River raid. Utilizing her spy network for intelligence, she guided 3 steamboats carrying Black soldiers past explosive mines on the river. And as Union forces assaulted the plantations, destroying infrastructure and seizing supplies, this led to the liberation of over 750 enslaved people. These enslaved people were forewarned, and they escaped and came aboard the boats despite armed overseers' attempts to stop the chaos. Harriet Tubman personally assisted them, singing to encourage them to the song Come Along, before the steamboats escaped toward Beaufort as Confederate troops arrived. What we saw, fairly straightforward, although I don't know about the burning boat, but still, wow.
That's so cool.
I swear that needed more screen time.
Maybe somebody will do a miniseries.
Yeah, really? Come on. Just her in the Civil War, please. When she talks about being a conductor and part of the war effort, she says, and I quote, "I had reasoned this out of my mind. There was one of 2 things I had a right to, liberty or death. If I could not have one, I would have the other. For no man should take me alive. I should fight for my liberty as long as my strength lasted. And when the time came for me to go, the Lord would let them take me." And she said this to Sarah Bradford, who I think was a suffragette. And then at the time that President Abraham Lincoln, he was not prepared to enforce the emancipation on the southern states, Harriet Tubman did condemn his response and his general unwillingness to consider ending slavery for both moral and practical reasons. And she said, and I quote, "God won't let Master Lincoln beat the South till he does the right thing. Master Lincoln, he's a great man, and I am a poor Negro. But the Negro can tell Master Lincoln how to save the money and the young men. He can do it by setting the Negro free."
Damn.
Yeah. Yep, I like that one.
This is going to sound weird. I want to work for her.
I know, right?
Right?
Yeah, she'd be a great boss. For 2 more years, till the end of the Civil War, she worked for the Union forces, tending to newly liberated people, scouting into the Confederate territory, and nursing wounded soldiers in Virginia. A task she continued for several months after the Confederacy surrendered in April 1865. We've already come to the end of the movie. The very short dialogue they gave at that point. All that to say that despite all of that, Harriet Tubman was only paid $200 for her wartime service.
What?
Yep, for 4 or 5 years.
Like, even back then, that had to be bullshit.
That was not great money. Less than half of her white male counterparts' monthly pay. She later received a pension not for her own service, but as the widow of Black Union soldier Nelson Davis.
All right, I'm going home.
Right, exactly. Oh, yeah. And after a Republican Congress member introduced a bill, President William McKinley eventually signed legislation granting Harriet Tubman a pension for her role as an army nurse. Despite lifelong financial issues, Tubman continued to serve those in need. In 1896, she opened the Harriet Tubman Home for the Aged and Indigent Colored People on land next to her home in Auburn, New York, which is near Seneca Falls, the birthplace of American feminism, just as a note. And she spent her remaining years there until her death in 1913, and the home became a site of pilgrimage for African Americans. And I'm going to go through some other not fun facts, but facts before we get to the fun facts. In October 1865, so after the end of the war, when she was traveling to New York on a half-fare service ticket, to explain that she got a discounted service ticket to travel on a train.
Okay.
She was ordered by a conductor to move from a regular passenger car to the smoking car.
Now, this would be the one time that I can think of that I would be in support of somebody pulling the "do you know who I am?"
I mean, kinda, and I don't know if she did that, but she did refuse to move.
Good.
And the conductor and additional men forcibly moved her, injuring her in the process. During the incident, white passengers cursed Tubman and demanded she be removed from the train. And this is after she's very well known. Just wanted to note that still, after all that, segregation. As I mentioned, she spent her later years in Auburn, New York, managing her farm, taking in boarders like her elderly parents, and working to support them. She did marry, as I mentioned, Nelson Davis, who was actually 22 years her junior.
Hey, Harriet.
Yep, on March 18th, 1869, at the Central Presbyterian Church. Davis, who was born enslaved in North Carolina, had served in the 8th United States Colored Infantry Regiment and worked as a bricklayer in Auburn, New York. And together they adopted a baby girl, Birdy, in 1874. And there's actually, I tried looking up more about her daughter, but there really isn't much. So she went on to live very quiet private life, apparently. Oh. Abolitionist friends and supporters did raise funds for Harriet Tubman as she continued to spend her money on everyone else except her.
You wouldn't know anything about that.
Here we are with Sarah Hopkins Bradford again. She wrote the authorized biography Scenes in the Life of Harriet Tubman from 1869, which did earn Tubman about $1,200 or $29,000 in today's money. But despite this help and paying off her farm's mortgage in 1873, still depleted all her savings. But I mean, she did pay off all that stuff. But the following October, she ended up being swindled. 2 black men convinced her that they could sell her smuggled gold coins at a deep discount, a claim she found plausible as she knew of Southerners burying their valuables during the war. She borrowed money and met them late one night. Lured into the woods, the men knocked her unconscious with chloroform and stole her purse. Harriet was found injured, and the trunk contained only rocks that they said was the gold. gold or whatever. Yeah. This crime did draw attention to Harriet's financial woes and renewed efforts to secure her Civil War compensation that she was owed. In 1874, Representatives McDougall and Hazelton introduced a bill for $2,000 repayment for her service as a scout, nurse, and spy, but the Senate defeated it, because it's always the Senate. But after her wood-framed house burned down in February 1880, supporters quickly helped replace it with a brick home. The government sucks, but thankfully she had community. Unfortunately, her husband, Nelson Davis, died in 1888, and the 1890 Dependent and Disability Pension Act made Tubman finally eligible for a widow's pension. In 1895, she was granted $8 monthly payment, which is about $310 in today's money, plus a $500 lump sum for the 5-year delay. In 1897, a bill was introduced to grant her a full soldier's pension of $25, which is about $970 in today's money. But there was objections to paying a woman a full soldier's pension.
Which so she did the full work, but we can't
pay her full work, which led to the 1899 compromise of $20 a month. $8 as a widow, and $12 for her nursing service.
Jesus.
And her work as a scout and a spy was not recognized. In her later years, Harriet Tubman actively promoted women's suffrage, stating to a white woman who questioned her belief in the cause, and I quote, "I suffered enough to believe it." In suffragism.
Like, why?
Because there was those white ladies that were like, well, my husband's enough. Everyone's married, right?
He votes in my interest.
My son gonna take care of me. She did attend suffragist meetings and worked with figures like Susan B. Anthony and Emily Howland. When she traveled to New York, Boston, and Washington, D.C., she spoke in favor of women's voting rights, and she described her actions during and after the Civil War as sacrifices of countless women throughout modern history and as evidence of women's equality to men. When the National Federation of Afro-American Women was founded, Tubman was a keynote speaker at the first conference in 1896. When the Federation was merged into the National Association of Colored Women, which still exists today, Tubman attended that organization's second conference in 1899. This wave of activism kindled a new wave of admiration for Harriet Tubman's work and was noted among the press in the United States. A publication called The Women's Era launched a series of articles on eminent women with a profile of Harriet Tubman. An 1897 suffragist newspaper reported a series of receptions in Boston honoring Tubman and her lifetime of service to the nation. However, her endless contributions to others had left her in poverty, and she had to sell a cow to buy a train ticket to these celebrations. In the 1870s, Tubman had become active in the Thompson Memorial African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church in Auburn, New York. And in 1895, she began discussions with the leaders and others to create a Harriet Tubman Home for the Aged, as I've mentioned before, that would care for indigent colored people. Despite her financial limitations, in 1896, Tubman bid $1,215, which is equivalent to $47,000 in today's money, at auction for a 25-acre farm adjacent to the one she already owned to use for the new facility. She designated one of the farm's buildings as its primary residence and named it John Brown Hall.
Oh,
yeah, to honor her late abolitionist ally. However, raising funds for the project was difficult, and attempts to donate the property were complicated by the multiple mortgages she had used to pay for it. After Tubman almost lost the property because of her financial difficulties, the Zion Church agreed to take it over in 1903. However, the home did not open for another 5 years. And Harriet was dismayed when the church ordered residents to pay a $100 entrance fee, which is the equivalent of about $3,580 in today's money. And she said, and I quote, "They make it a rule that nobody should come in without the $100. Now I wanted to make a rule that nobody should come in unless they didn't have no money at all."
Oh, God, she's amazing.
Right, exactly. I agree. And she was frustrated by the rule, but was the guest of honor nonetheless when the home celebrated its opening on June 23rd, 1908. As Tubman aged, her childhood head trauma continued to trouble her. Unable to sleep because of pain and buzzing in her head, in the late 1890s, she asked a doctor at Boston, Massachusetts General Hospital to operate on her. In her words, he, quote, "sawed open my skull and raised it up." Trying to put that in perspective, because her skull was dented from the weight that hit her head. Yeah. So for all those years, she had a literal dent in her skull. They went in and literally lifted that edge of her skull. Ugh. But they raised it up, and now it feels more comfortable.
Okay.
And I quote,
"Okay, results don't lie. Okay."
She reportedly received no anesthesia and instead bit down on a bullet.
Jesus Christ!
As she had seen Civil War soldiers do when their limbs were amputated. By 1911, Harriet's body was so frail that she was admitted into the rest home named in her honor. A New York newspaper described her as ill and penniless, prompting supporters to offer a new round of donations. Surrounded by friends and family members, she died of pneumonia on March 10th, 1913. Just before she died, she quoted the Gospel of John to those in the room. "I go away to prepare a place for you." And Tubman was buried in semi-military honors at Fort Hill Cemetery in Auburn, New York. In regards to objects related to Harriet's life, which are now kept in the National Museum of African American History and Culture, the museum highlights her impact on her contemporaries, such as the shawl gifted to her by Queen Victoria to acknowledge her international impact, and other personal objects like her hymnal, which reveal her domestic life as a wife and mother, and the devout religious beliefs that inspired her to conduct hundreds of African Americans to freedom from bondage. She was best known as the enslaved woman who brought emancipation to anyone who crossed her path, and the legacy of Harriet Tubman's life work has inspired countless people across generations and geographic locations. And that is the life and times of Harriet Tubman. As a final note, I did want to cover a little bit about John Brown because we kept mentioning him, so I'll do that now. John Brown, who was born May 9th, 1800, and passed away, he was killed. He was executed. December 2nd, 1859. He was an American abolitionist in the decades preceding the Civil War. He first reached national prominence in the 1850s for his radical abolitionism and fighting in the Bleeding Kansas situation, which is a whole other thing, but I won't go into it right here. He was captured, tried, and executed by the Commonwealth of Virginia for the Harper's Ferry raid and incitement of a slave rebellion in 1859. So he was another evangelical Christian of strong religious convictions. I was like, can't we have these evangelicals now? Brown was profoundly influenced by the Puritan faith of his upbringing. He believed that he was an instrument of God, raised to strike the death blow to slavery in the United States, and it was a sacred obligation. Brown was the leading exponent of violence in the American abolitionist movement, believing it was necessary to end slavery after decades of peaceful efforts had failed. I get you, sir. Brown said that in working to free the enslaved, he was following Christian ethics, including the Golden Rule and the Declaration of Independence, which states that all men are created equal. He stated that in his view, these two principles meant the same thing. John Brown first gained national attention when he led anti-slavery volunteers and his sons during the Bleeding Kansas crisis of the 1850s, a state-level civil war over whether Kansas would enter the Union as a slave state or a free state. He was dissatisfied with abolitionist pacifism, saying, "These men are all talk. What we need is action." Action! Exclamation point. In May 1856, Brown and his sons killed 5 supporters of slavery in the Potawatomi Massacre, a response to the sacking of Lawrence, Kansas, by pro-slavery forces. Brown then commanded anti-slavery forces at the Battle of Black Jack and the Battle of Osawatomie. In October 1859, Brown led the raid on the Federal Armory at Harper's Ferry, as we've mentioned, intending to start a slave liberation movement that would spread south. He had prepared a provisional constitution for the revised slavery-free United States that he hoped to bring about. He seized the armory, but 7 people were killed and 10 more were injured. Brown intended to arm the slaves with weapons from the armory, but only a few slaves joined his revolt. We can't fault them for that. Those of Brown's men who had not fled were killed or captured by local militia and a U.S. Marines, and the latter led by Robert E. Lee. Brown was tried for treason against the Commonwealth of Virginia, the murder of 5 men, and inciting a slave insurrection. He was found guilty and was hanged on December 2nd, 1859, the first person executed for treason in the history of the United States. The Harper's Ferry raid and Brown's trial, both covered extensively in national newspapers, escalated tensions that in the next year led to the South's long-threatened secession from the United States and the American Civil War. So a lot of this we know. I mean, it's kind of hinted at when we go over history in our elementary schools that the Harper's Ferry raid led to the Civil War. Yeah, Southerners feared that others would soon follow in Brown's footsteps, encouraging and arming slave rebellions. He was widely viewed as a hero and icon in the North. Union soldiers marched to the new song John Brown's Body that portrayed him as a heroic martyr. Brown has been variously described as a heroic martyr and visionary and as a madman and terrorist, which, look, we grew up in the North and that's what we hear now over 100 and some odd years later, unfortunately. Yeah, 150 years later. The act of resistance sharpened tensions between the North and South, and again served as a major catalyst for the Civil War. I did want to do that little bit on John Brown because I felt it was important, just like Frederick Douglass, Thomas Garrett, and William Still, these people that were like barely in the movie but were very important. Now, just to move on with the afterthoughts and fun facts, how did you feel about this movie?
God, I love this movie.
Yeah, it was good, but it did not hit me like Killers of the Flower Moon did. I feel this movie should have centered around her time in the war and after. Like, I feel like there was several missed opportunities. And again, for all the famous people we encounter, I understand you like this movie, but like, I don't know. How do you feel about all that?
That is disappointing. I don't know. It's one of those things that I kind of tell myself, okay, maybe somebody will pick this up as a miniseries. Would be lovely.
So what fun facts do you have?
As mentioned previously, this was co-written by Cassie Lemons and Gregory Allen Howard. And this is the one I told you about that was, I'm pretty sure, is going to piss you off. Gregory Allen Howard, when he first pitched this screenplay, it was in the 90s. And when he approached a studio, he doesn't name who, but he approached a studio and an executive suggested that the part of Harriet Tubman be played by Julia Roberts.
Excuse me?
Yeah. When Howard pointed out that Roberts is very much not black, the exec said, quote, "It was so long ago, no one is going to know the difference."
Excuse me?
Yeah.
How do you...
Did you see that thing recently about the white lady that she was putting on the one woman show about Harriet Tubman?
No.
And she was playing Harriet Tubman.
What?
Yeah, that was this year. This is the first feature film about Tubman.
Which is sad. I thought there might be something else, but no.
I knew she looked familiar, but I was very happy to find that director Cassie Lemons, she is also an actress. She's been in quite a few films. And the two that I knew her from was her role as Ardelia Mapp in Silence of the Lambs. She was Starling's best friend and the person that she went to work through all of the clues that Lecter had given her.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, and she's the one that helped her figure everything out.
Oh, okay.
And Bernadette in Candyman.
Oh.
Yes. Terrence Howard composed the score, and he also scored, which when I saw this, I was like, oh my God, yes, he's amazing. He also scored Malcolm X, Black Klansman,
okay,
Next Friday, and Barbershop. So he has an extensive catalog, and there's quite a few more. That he also wrote the song, the goodbye song that Harriet sings when she's telling her family that she's leaving.
Yeah.
And the song at the end, Stand Up, was written by Erivo and Joshua Campbell. And a couple things that I just thought were interesting. I don't know if I will pronounce this correctly, so my apologies. Both Tubman and Erivo are of Igbo descent, which is southeastern Nigerian. Oh. So as far as they can tell, I'm not sure if they've done genealogical on her descendants, but this is where ancestors would have originated from. In Igbo tradition, a carving or a small piece of wood is called ofu na ogu, and it is a symbol of innocence and blessings. The article that I read, they believe that is why they included her father handing her the carving.
Okay.
In regards to that, Frederick Douglass, he carried a small piece of wood that was given to him by an elderly Black gentleman after he was beaten by an overseer. And after he began carrying it, he was never beaten again. And those are my fun facts.
For my fun facts, I wanted to talk about it is a famous quote about Harriet, I freed 1,000 slaves. This quote's often attributed to Harriet Tubman, but it's quite bogus. And I even saw it used in one of my source videos before I found out it was bogus. So this fictitious quote surfaced more in our lifetime around the 2000s. There's absolutely no evidence she ever said this. The full quote is, I freed 1,000 slaves. I could have freed 1,000 more if only they knew they were slaves. I'm sure this might have been meant figuratively, and I can't speak to the intention of the person who created, but it's really ideologically damaging if you think about it. The idea of people being too stupid to know they're being used or enslaved or that they're in a cage kind of thing. I mean, we see this in a lot of about women, about other minorities. Like, oh, well, they don't even know they're being used. I genuinely believe most people, though, are smart in varying levels. You know, it's hard to think that anyone doesn't know, like, something's going on. And inherently, I believe all humans are capable of understanding the wealth of knowledge humanity has cultivated. But the difference always lies in a particular human's life experience and opportunity. Do they have the time? Do they have the resources? Do they have the influence needed to process the information they have? So these slaves who didn't know they were slaves didn't have the influence, time, and resources to understand their situation or how to leave it. And fear clouds everything else on top of it. Even if that was actually a quote, it doesn't really do disingenuous to the actual slaves who may have said, like her sister, no, I have to stay behind. It doesn't consider the situation that all these people are in. And I think that's like a situation we can even see for ourselves as people who are stuck on the lower ladders of our classism. As we're not poor, but we're not, we're not wealthy. And why aren't we rising up in the streets right now? Like, I'd love to, but then again, I have a child and I need to take care of my community. And so, you're stuck. So it's a lack of resources, I also wanted to talk about, as I've mentioned a little bit, Tubman has her own place in disability history. And it's very often overlooked because it's overshadowed by, oh, she had these visions, and people forget, no, that actually was stemmed from an actual physical situation. It's important to note that they believed she had narcolepsy, and it was a prominent part of her identity and story. So these vivid visions of freedom that came to her while she was experiencing these seizures were, in fact, part of a disability. And as a result of her visions, her disability is often associated with her religiosity, which is also very important to her. But it's important to note that she did all this while she was in incredible pain and incredible vulnerability, and that her disability was also a dedication to her faith, and her experience with chronic pain holds equal weight, and they were a key to her determination to seek liberation for herself and everyone else. The historian Deidre Cooper Owens spoke importance of her disability in her essay Harriet Tubman's Disability and Why It Matters. She offered up a version of freedom where a disabled Black woman sat at the center of it, where Black women were liberators and where liberation was communal and democratic. Some early accounts described Tubman as warning fugitives that turning back could endanger the entire group. And this speaks to that carrying a gun thing that I mentioned. And it's a tradition that's sometimes summarized as go on or die, or dead men tell no tales. However, modern scholarship has examined these stories cautiously, and historian Jonathan Chisholm argues that they reflect the extreme conditions of escape and raise ethical questions about leadership and survival, and notes that there's no evidence that she ever killed anyone. Even if that was a thing she did, it was definitely more bark than bite. We just want to note that. Some fun facts about her methods and routes. She usually worked during winter when long nights and cold weather minimize the chance of being seen. Also, I want to note that she's traveling hundreds of miles and she chooses to traverse those hundreds of miles in the middle of winter.
Total badass.
And even if it was still North Carolina, it's still cold. She would start the escapes on Saturday evenings since newspapers would not print runaway notices until Monday morning.
Oh,
so
she's so fucking cool.
Extra day. She also used several subterfuges. She once disguised herself with a bonnet and carried 2 live chickens to give the appearance of running errands. And if she suddenly found herself walking toward a former enslaver, she yanked the strings on the chickens, holding the birds' legs, and their agitation, allowed her to avoid eye contact.
Oh my god. She's so fucking cool.
Yep. Another incident, she recognized a fellow train passenger as a former enslaver, so she snatched a nearby newspaper and pretended to read. Tubman was known to be illiterate, so the man ignored her. It is worth noting that some sources say she saved over 300 people during her missions, but this is exaggerated, sort of, kind of, from an early biography. It cannot diminish what she did, however. We have to remember that she took these missions over the course of 8 years in winter, traveling hundreds of miles through what basically can be described as enemy territory. Enemy territory. And then she needed to find and convince these people to leave, and then lead them back through that same territory while keeping everyone alive, all while dealing with chronic physical issues. She could have done this with 10 people and I'd still be impressed,
right?
Honestly. So I just wanted to say that because they say, oh, she didn't actually save 300. Well, but she saved over 70 people, and then she liberated over 750 people in the Civil War. Please.
I think she did enough.
I think she did enough. And as a final fun fact, in 1997, Congress passed H.R. 1635, which President Bill Clinton signed into law, which authorized the United States National Park Service to establish the National Underground Railroad Network to Freedom, which is a program to identify associated sites and popularize the Underground Railroad. This also affirmed William Still's national importance as a leading Underground Railroad agent in a major center of abolition. Not until 1997 did we fully acknowledge the Underground Railroad network. And it's worth noting that Harriet Tubman has 2 national parks or like sub-park in her name, which is one more than anyone else in American history. So, and that's all my fun facts. Shall we move on to sources?
Okay, well, for mine, obviously Wikipedia and IMDb. From Film Review, Harriet as Igbo. This is from the New Journal and Guide. It's an article by Biko Agozina, which was very cool. It's where I got the information about where he discusses the carving that her father gives her. The Facts and Faith of Harriet. A historian reviews the Tubman biopic, and that is on the Family Theater Productions website by Kate O'Hare. What's Fact and Fiction in Harriet is a Slate article by Rochelle Hampton. Harriet, the Real Life Inspirations Behind the Characters, The Hollywood Reporter by Umber Bhatti. And Harriet Tubman Gets Her Movie, Frock Flicks by Tristan L. Bass, which was super fun.
Well, I also had many sources, but I'm going to highlight my main ones here. Drunk History. Harriet Tubman Leads an Army of Bad Bitches, which featured Octavia Spencer.
Oh, I gotta watch that one.
Then I have an article called Harriet Tubman, the Conductor of Freedom. And then by biography, Harriet Tubman rescued over 300 slaves through Underground Railroad. Again, slightly misquoted. A lot is fact. And then, of course, Wikipedia, Harriet Tubman, which does not misquote her. And then an article by the Women's History Museum, Harriet Tubman. Then PBS, Harriet Tubman. Harriet Tubman, Life, Liberty, and Legacy by the National Museum of African American History and Culture. And then You're Dead to Me, 10 Heroic Facts About the Incredible Harriet Tubman by BBC Radio 4.
Okay.
I don't remember why it's called You're Dead to Me. Don't ask. And then 5 Facts You Might Know About Harriet Tubman by the NPCA, National Parks Conservation Association. And then 8 Things You Didn't Know About Harriet Tubman by the NBC Washington Post. Fact check. I freed 1,000 slaves, quote, falsely attributed to Harriet Tubman by Reuters. So those are all my main sources, and I will be doing plenty of information dumping on you for the outtakes episode, so stay tuned. Shall I announce our next movie?
Yes, so next is Birdy's pick, and what are we doing next time?
We are taking a full 180, and I'm actually really excited about this, and it's going to be so much fun. So we're going to do 1987's Dirty Dancing.
I had the
Time of my life. Oh my goodness. And I know our dear Brick's going to have plenty
I can't wait.
movie making fun facts for that one. So I have high expectations.
I'm already planning to rewatch a thing, the movies that made us from Netflix. They have an episode on this.
That is really good. Very important. But you need to look into all the music for that, because the reason I ended up picking this movie, I had another movie in mind, which we will cover, but I definitely wanted to do a fun, and there's definitely scenes in this movie that there's plenty to talk about, but just kind of a fun boppy one, and a palate cleanser, as they say. But I've been hearing all these fun facts about Dirty Dancing and the songs, and we're talking 39 years. This came out a year before I was born. 39 years ago.
Came out the year I was born.
Darling Patrick Swayze and everyone else in this. There's still some major people in this movie.
Oh, yeah. Jennifer Grey and
Oh, gosh. I'm excited about this, but I do have high expectations, Brick.
I will try to live up to them.
All right, thank you.
I'll do my best.
No pressure.
Cut to Brick in a week sobbing.
No pressure.
Over a web browser.
All right, so leaving you with that, thank you for joining us for this. Thank you for listening to Celluloid Chronicles, a historical movie podcast. Please like and subscribe to us wherever you listen, and we hope you join us again soon.
And always remember,
live like you're making history. Yay!